Good evening. It is good to be here with our family at Caddo Mills. This congregation has meant a lot to me in a number of different ways, and I'm excited to see how things are coming along. The front wall looks much better than it did the last time I was here. And looks great. Elders, how exciting to think that news meeting might be the last one. That's great stuff. Uh, I'll be keeping that in my prayers. And I'm excited to be able to share with you an update on the work that we have been doing. And I'm thankful for your fellowship in our work with the Manna Project, for your prayers and support. And so this work that I'm sharing with you this evening is not my work, it is our work. Ah, So at the Manna Project, our main goal is to train preachers to be ministers of the gospel and teach them to be self-supporting through agriculture. This is a very biblical concept. Paul in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 taught the brethren there to work with their own hands, that they might walk honestly toward those that are without. That is, develop a good and honest reputation among those outside the body, and that you may have lack of nothing. And so to be able to work with your own hands, to provide for yourself, so that, number one, you have lack of nothing, and number two, then that develops a good reputation among those outside the body. And the last couple of years, during the pandemic, and all the things that go with that, that's been a big deal. And so as we teach these guys to preach the gospel, we've got three schools of preaching, and there's two sides to the curriculum. The Bible curriculum places an emphasis on doctrinal soundness, on evangelism, on going and planting congregations, going places where the gospel has not been. And the other side of that, of course, is agriculture. Not taking a John Deere tractor over there, but improving the local methods, working with what they have. So for farming, that means a rake and a hoe. And raising the local livestock and things like that, something that's sustainable. And so we have three schools. The first and oldest of these, the Nzori School of Preaching in southwestern Uganda. Over the last 6 years, we've graduated two classes of students. In January of 2020, gave diplomas to 10 men who've all gone out and begun working. I'm excited to see the things that those guys are doing. And in January of 2020, we received 15 new students to our 2-year program. And here we are, a little over 2 years later. They are about halfway through that program. It's been a difficult 2 years for those guys. Uganda holds the world's record for the longest COVID lockdown. 18 months of a hard lockdown. That's a record you don't want to have. And that's created a lot of hardships and a lot of challenges for the people living there in Uganda. It's also created some opportunities for sharing the gospel. The main crop there at the school is vanilla, also raising ducks and goats. Actually, just the last couple of weeks, sold several goats, and with the proceeds from those goats, went and leased more land to plant food crops. And then our next school is the Modele School of Preaching in northwest Cameroon. That school is now 4 years old. 2 years ago, we graduated a class of 6 students. We have 8 students who are just finishing up and about to graduate. The main crop there is bananas. We've actually in the last year added beans as another good food crop there. We're trying to get each school to where it has three main crops that it's working on. Three-legged stool, if you will. And the beans are doing very well. And also they're at Modele. They're right by the river, so they're able to trap tilapia out of the river and sell those and eat them. And that's all going very well. And then we have the Talawanda School of Preaching in Tanzania. This is the coastal plain, the area near Dar es Salaam. It's controlled predominantly by Muslims. That school is now 2 years old. In July of this year, this past July, we graduated 5 men and received, and notice there it says that school can house 10 students and their families. I'll come back to that. But we received 15 new students in July. Very excited about the things going on there. The main crop there is corn. We also, within the last year, added pigs. We are doing a wonderful business there, selling pork in the Muslim food markets and using the proceeds of that to spread the gospel among the Muslims. It's great. A lot of exciting things going on. You want to improve somebody's life, introduce them to faith. In Matthew chapter 28, Jesus gave us the Great Commission, told us to go into all the world and preach the gospel. This map behind the Great Commission there is the State Department CDC's travel map. If the country's in red, that's a level 4, do not travel. If it's in orange, it's a level 3. Really, you shouldn't travel. But if you do, there's going to be some quarantine and other things going on. If it's a yellow, that's a level 2. Probably just a test and go type situation. Green, there are, I think, now 3 countries that are level 1. So when you're a foreign missionary, and that's what the world map looks like, the whole go into the world thing becomes challenging. It's been interesting to open up the map and say, well, where can we go? And we've had opportunities come up, and we say, okay, well, this looks like something we could do, and begin working and planning towards that, and that country shuts down. Well, you'll notice Tanzania is a level 4, do not travel. I've been there several times while it's in that state. Also, Antarctica is a level 4, do not travel, because they do not accurately report their COVID numbers to the U.S. government. Do with that information what you will. But the situation has reminded me a lot of Aquila and Priscilla. When we first introduced them in Acts chapter 18, we find them in Corinth. Here's the thing. They hadn't planned to be in Corinth. They planned to be in Rome, but there was a government lockdown. The government said, you can't be here, be somewhere else to work. We find them in Corinth, and they're making friends with Paul, and they're evangelizing. And as we see Aquila and Priscilla travel about, they leave in their wake the path of disciples. And so we have tried this last year or so to follow in the footsteps of Aquila and Priscilla and go where we can and do what we can. And so this map here is from Google, and she knows everything. That is my location history for 2021. I've been several places in the United States, Ukraine, Turkey, Middle East, and also Tanzania. And there's been some interesting opportunities come up. One of the first things that we figured out as we began looking at this is the city of Istanbul, formerly Constantinople, is rather unique. Right before COVID hit, they finished construction on a multi-billion-dollar airport facility. They said, we ain't shutting it down, we got to pay for this thing. And so they overnight became the busiest airport in Europe. And if you could get there without touching the ground anywhere else in Europe, then you could go other places. Just so happens Turkish Airlines added a direct flight, DFW to Istanbul. And so that kind of became our key to going other places. And since we were there, we started looking, saying, well, what's here? And what we found is the only city in the world that's situated on 2 continents, both Europe and Asia. There are some 16 million souls in Istanbul. That makes it twice the size of New York City. There are 3,600 Islamic mosques, 350 sectarian churches, 150 Jewish synagogues within that city. And as best I can tell, there are 0 congregations of the Lord's Church. That's 16 million souls living in darkness. And so we started looking for opportunities to fix that. And we found opportunities like Jeff Kubudan. Jeff is a native of Iran. And he fled Iran after the Iranian government hastened his father's death, not because he was a Christian, but because he was sympathetic toward Christians. And so Jeff is living in Istanbul with his wife and daughter, and he began questioning. He wanted to know about this religion his father died with. And so he began searching, came in contact with me on the internet, and he has been studying English so he could read the Bible. And as we met with Jeff and began talking to us, he explained that he's a Persian by birth. And he read about the Persian Empire and all that. That's Jeff's people. And well, Leah started looking. She said, well, look right here. Here's a Bible in Persian. You can download this on your phone for free. He said, absolutely not. No way. Because most of the Bibles that are in the Persian language are published by the Iranian government. They're going to track it. And if I download that, then they'll come find me here. No. So he's studying English. So he can learn the Bible in a safe language. What a blessing we have to be able to just flop open the Bible in any translation you want. Just read it. And we were able to go back in March of this year, meet with Jeff again and his wife and daughter. And one of the things that I have been working with Jeff on is I use some software to translate a Bible study into Persian. This software translation, not perfect. And so Jeff is helping me to edit those studies. Process, he's studying the Bible himself. Another opportunity we ran into was Stephen and Anna. Stephen and Anna live in Iraq, northern Iraq. And when they heard that we were going to be as close to them as Istanbul, they wanted to meet with us. And so at their own expense, they got visas and booked airfare and flew to Istanbul so they could meet with us. Stephen and Anna, in the wake of Operation Iraqi Freedom, gained access to the first time ever to the World Wide Web. On the World Wide Web, they learned about the gospel. And they're privately baptized in the Pope in Christians. Very much babes in Christ. They have access to very little. There's a lot that they don't know. There's a lot that they don't know that they don't know that they don't know. And it was one of the things that was very important to Stephen was that we understand who they are. They're from northern Iraq, from Kurdistan. They're the Kurds. The Kurds are the ancient Medes. The other half are the Medes and the Persians. And as we were sitting there talking, I pulled out of my bag one of those little $5 ESVs you can get from the whole Bible store. I read it on the ticket. And Anna said, "What's that?" I said, "Well, that's Bible." And she started to tremble, and she reached towards it and recoiled. Reached again and recoiled. It took her a good 60 seconds before finally she could pick it up. And she picked it up. I said, "Anna, that Bible is yours." She gave a cry. She never dreamed that she would see the complete Bible, much less own it. And since that study, we've been able to stay in contact with them. They're very picky about the apps that they use to communicate because of surveillance. Being a Christian in Iraq carries a death penalty. If it's not from the government, your friends and neighbors, if they find out you're a Christian, they'll kill you. And so, they wanted to have an app that was encrypted end-to-end, something not owned by Facebook. And we've been able to find something, and we've continued to correspond, to communicate, to study with them. And they've mentioned how much of a big deal it is for them to have that Bible during difficult times, persecution, suffering. They're able to read from the Psalms and read the words of Jesus and take comfort. But even knowing the cost of being a Christian in God, they also understand the importance of evangelism. They've picked out 8 critical tomatoes that they think are good candidates. Tell me, what's up with you? What's in your brain? Had a couple of other opportunities there in Istanbul. Talked to Eklund and also Egeman, who lived in Bursa, and have studied with Bill and continued correspondence. And one of the things that you see there in Istanbul is the Hagia Sophia. The Hagia Sophia is a church that was built by the Emperor Justinian about the year 500 AD. And after the Ottoman Empire, the Muslims came in and took over Constantinople. They converted that to an active mosque, and it's a mosque today. And right when you walk in the door of this church building, when it was first constructed, Justinian walked in and said, "Solomon, I have surpassed you." And when you walk in the front door, there's this golden mosaic. On one side, you see Justinian presenting it to the Virgin Mary, the Hagia Sophia as a gift. On the other side, the Emperor Constantine presenting to her the city of Constantinople. And so this is a great prize for the Muslims to have this as a mosque. And standing directly in front of the Hagia Sophia is a blue mosque, which was built about 1,400 years later, and they had one goal. They wanted to make it bigger and better than the Hagia Sophia to prove that Islam is greater than Christianity. And so to go to these places and talk to these people about the kingdom of God, a kingdom that doesn't need buildings, that doesn't have borders or armies, but a spiritual kingdom, a kingdom that's made up of souls scattered around the globe. That is something new. That is something different than any religion they have ever encountered before. And so we're trying to follow in the footsteps of Phil and Priscilla, go where we can and do what we can. And in April of last year, we had the invitation opportunity. We had the invitation opportunity to be in Kyiv, Ukraine. And while we were there doing some evangelism and working with the church, encouraging them, we had the privilege of meeting with several people. This brother right here in the green, that's Alexander. Alexander's a gospel preacher, and I guess it was back in 2018 when he was preaching for a congregation in Donetsk, Crimea. On Sunday morning, the Russian army came in the building and said, "This building now belongs to us. You have 2 hours, take your stuff and get out." So he did. And he took his family and fled to Kyiv to live in safety. And him and his family have been living in Kyiv, and he's been evangelizing, working with the church there, and building up the body. And Alexander is now deployed somewhere with the Ukrainian army. We were able to help his oldest daughter get out of the country. His wife and youngest daughter, last we heard, were trapped. But also, another gospel preacher in the Donetsk, Crimea area was Leon. Leon had passed away about 6 months ago. But Leonid's daughter was raised in the church. She married outside the mosque. Her husband is a busy man. He's a good provider. He works 7 days a week to provide the things that his family needs. He doesn't have time for myths and fables and silly things like God and church. And he never really listened to his father-in-law. But at his father-in-law's insistence, he was happy to sit down and study the Bible with some missionaries who came from halfway around the world. Sometimes that's what it takes to reach the people that are closest to us. Whatever it takes, that's what we do. And so he sat down and talked about what's important, and talked about the promises of Jesus Christ, that if you seek him and his righteousness and his kingdom first, those things are slaving away for 7 days. We've done those things. Put first things first. And also there in the back corner was their nephew, Kirill. Kirill's mother, Tanya, fled Ukraine in 2018. She said, "Enough's enough, I'm getting out." She lives in Lisbon, Portugal. And about 9 months ago, Kirill also moved to Lisbon to be there with his mom and to study at university. And he got there and he wrote to us and he said, "There's no church here. Could you come help us?" And so we began working and making plans to travel to Lisbon. We're actually in Lisbon in March, about to do the same time that Putin was marching into Kyiv. We were flying to Lisbon. And so we met with Kirill and Tanya and 2 Christians. We worshiped with them on Sunday morning, and it had been 2 years since Tanya had been able to worship and observe communion with other citizens. And because we happened to be there, and one of the first things that Putin destroyed was Ukraine's banking system, sending money to Ukraine. Not going to happen. But we were able to put money in Tanya's account. And she was able to buy airfare. And so her sister and niece and her widowed mother were able to go to the airport and pick up those tickets and get out of those things because we had to be there to listen. And her brother-in-law that we studied with is, of course, deployed with the Ukrainian army. But with the help of Tanya and Kirill, we have the beginnings of a Russian-speaking Ukrainian congregation being planted in Lisbon, Portugal. Going where we can and doing what we can. with the opportunities that we have. But again, we try to focus and keep the main thing on teaching these men to be preachers of the gospel, and teaching them to work with their hands, to build that honest reputation for those that are without, and they're going to have need of nothing. And so, our school in Modele, Cameroon, Brother Eddie Paul writes, and I don't have any pictures of Cameroon. He says the reason why is that it's not possible to send pictures because of the high rate of insecurity. The separatist fighters, if in the course of searching my belongings they find an Android phone or a camera, they will not spare my life. Indeed, it's a routine occurrence for Eddie Paul. He's going about doing evangelism. He stopped him on a checkpoint and have a gun held to his head while they rifle through his bags and take the things that they want or don't want him with. But he says, for now, we're running smoothly because we respect that is, rebels, rules, and regulations. He goes on and he says that we have continued in spreading the gospel irrespective of the insecurity and the current pandemic disease. But preaching has been more challenging because people don't want to see strangers and unknown persons in their home because there's a civil war going on and a pandemic. So we don't know who you are or what you have. But nevertheless, they continue. And so in 2021, the students and faculty there at Modele baptized 50 souls in the focus, restored 70 out-of-duty Christians, and planted 15 congregations. One of those congregations is the result of sharing the gospel of Christ with the sectarian preacher. And he went and taught his congregation the truth of the scriptures. And there's a new congregation within the church. So often we look at somebody and say, oh, well, they wouldn't be interested. I mean, that person created the Bible class program there. That person is a deacon there. That person's, they're happy where they wouldn't be interested. We just need to sow the seed and trust the power of the word. Oftentimes, it's those that we would think are receptive who are searching. He goes on and says, Modele School is doing great in evangelism. And there in the Mincham area, there around the school, are 10 of those 15 congregations within easy shooting distance. Maybe that's not the word to use right now. So the students are able to go out and preach for those congregations. That helps build up those congregations and also helps those students to gain experience in teaching and preaching. And again, our focus is not on giving out food, but on teaching them to do for themselves, to work with their own hands, to build up that reputation among those that are repaid. And the Resort School of Preaching, as I mentioned, has faced a lot of challenges. And in the midst of those challenges, the students and faculty there continue to do great work. In one report in Boosa says, speaking of Kisesi, there the school is, that we planted 2 congregations there in Kisesi, and our students are preaching for them. While we were there last month, we were able to visit one of those congregations that didn't exist at the beginning of the pandemic. In another report, he says that due to the lockdowns, we're not allowed to meet in groups or to move around, and so we're using tracts and other written materials to do evangelism. Souls are being saved, and congregations are being planted. Matty John was one of those 10 men who graduated in January of 2020. He came to us from Kalea. Kalea congregation in Bandabujo district was planted a few years ago when 2 friends who were Muslims learned the truth, became Christians, and set the mountainside on fire, spreading the gospel. That congregation grew and planted another congregation, kept growing and planted another congregation, kept growing and planted another congregation. Matty John went back there to help with evangelism. And after he got there, he called on Mbusa, our director, and said, there's a village up here that hasn't received the gospel. I want to go. Can you help me? So Mbusa went, and he helped Matty John. They had a campaign. And they taught the gospel, planted a new congregation. And those Christians said, this is amazing. No, there's another village further up the mountain. They haven't heard this. They need to hear this too. Can we go there? So you've got a new congregation going and planting another new congregation. People are hungry for the word. People are searching for truth. Another report, he says, I spent the whole of today in evangelism. People in the Possessive District keep calling on me for the word of God, and tomorrow we shall receive more prospects. And again, our focus is on teaching them to do with their hands what they can. But again, the pandemic created a very unusual situation I think none of us saw coming. And there was a great epidemic of starvation caused by the lockdowns. And the government's official position is not to help. Matter of fact, there's a law passed that any government officials or politicians who got caught distributing food would be tried for attempted murder for spreading the virus. And a member of the Uganda media interviewed one of the president's cabinet members and said, what are you going to do about the starvation? He said, you weren't working before, you're not working now, you'll figure it out. And so we got busy, we raised funds, we sent food last summer to Uganda. We sent food, seeds for food crops, and soap. Soap because, well, it's always good to wash your hands, especially when there's a pandemic. And that's one of the things, by the way, that changed. You know, usually when I go to Africa, I go in somebody's home to eat, they bring a pitcher of water, I pour the water so I can wash my hands, and that's nice. But this year when I went, they brought a pitcher of water and a bar of soap. Good stuff. But we sent the money for food, and Booster writes, he says, you helped us at the right time when our Christians have started sleeping on empty stomachs. And I know that we have suffered too through all of this. The economy is not a toy. You can just turn it off and turn it back on. But I don't think any of us have suffered like that. And I asked him, Busa, well, how is this relating to evangelism? He said, speaking of those outside the body, particularly members of denominational sects and Muslims, he said that they're seeing a good picture of love and unity among the brethren. They know that Christians are supposed to help, and they see that the churches of Christ are helping. And they say, my church isn't doing that. The mosque isn't doing that. How can I become a part of a church that loves like that? And doors are being opened. And so we sent $25,337 to Uganda. And that's an odd number because there's a congregation in England also, so there's conversion. And the first thing we want to do is help out the widows. So we gave food to 89 widows. Gave them seeds for food crop, helped them plant those seeds, make sure they would be able. Once those widows were taken care of, we then started working with local congregations and distributing food. And we distributed food in 156 different villages in Uganda and Congo. And that's interesting. When the lockdowns got really bad and we couldn't do anything in Uganda, they shipped it across the border to Congo. There's a civil war going on in Congo and the lockdowns, and they continued to work to evangelize. And as a general rule, even though public gatherings were not allowed, the local government officials, when they saw the crowds gathering to get food, they turned a blind eye because they knew the need was there. And as a direct result of this food distribution, there were 107 souls who requested Bible study. 69 of those were baptized in the Christ. I think that math works out to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $400 or $500 or so. Pretty good investment, yes. And in 2021, and I had to go back and double check this number and ask a couple of other trusted brothers in Uganda just to make sure I had this right. But in 2021, the students and faculty there at the Enjoy School planted 6 new congregations in Uganda. 2 there in Kasese, those 2 in Bundabugo district with Matty John plus 2 more. Planted 5 new congregations in Congo. Now there's a caveat to that. Since then, the violence in Congo has gotten bad enough that refugees have been flooding across the Uganda border by the thousands. And there's a village right on the Congo border called Kazaroho. I was able to visit that in April. When I got as close to the border from here to the back of the building, and I was told you can't get any closer than that. And I shot. I said, you can't. And the congregation there, Kazaroho, is a Ugandan congregation, a fairly new congregation. They are hosting effectively 3 of those Congolese congregations. And those saints or refugees, they came across with nothing but the clothes on them. And saying clothes is really rather generous. They have nothing. And so while I was there, I bought them some food. I sent them all home about 80 pounds of cassava flour, which would last them a few weeks. And I took 2 bags of clothes that otherwise would have been bound for good. I gave them there. They were so grateful to receive those. But those saints are doing great things. By the way, this morning there were 4 souls baptized into Christ there. And in 2021, there were 315 souls baptized into Christ by the local students in Caddo. People are hungry. Starving, yes, but also hungry for the Word of God. And so as we work teaching these men to work with their ears, build up their reputation, those who it makes a difference. Then we come to Talawanda, Tanzania. That school, in July, we graduated 5 men. Of those 5 men, 3 of them were not Christians when they came to us. Now all 5 are gospel preachers. I want to tell you a little bit about these 5 men. First, we have Benante Kuma. Benante came to us from Dar es Salaam. He's a native there. There in Dar, there's a work called the Tanzania Bible School. It's run by the brothers there. And there's a night school, and it has an evangelistic purpose. Almost all the students who enroll are non-Christians. Almost all the students who complete the course are Christians. Benante studied there. He learned the gospel and became a Christian. And he said, I need to learn more. I want to be a gospel preacher. So they sent Benante to us at Talawanda. He studied there with us for 2 years. And originally, his plan was to go back to Dar. His home congregation there in Dar has taken the studies that we have, the truth about Islam, translated them into Swahili. And they're using them with great effect, baptizing Muslims right now. And Benante's original plan was to go back there and help with evangelism. Somewhere along the way, something caught his eye. A city in the southern part of the country of about 30,000 people. And that city is the national headquarters for the Catholic Church in Tanzania. No congregation of the Lord's Church there. So Benante has moved to that city, and he's farming. He started planting his crops and raising his animals, and he's selling his crops in the marketplace. And as he's selling in the market, he's sharing the gospel with those who buy and sell. Kind of reminds me of Will himself. And he's working to plant a congregation at the heart of the Catholic Church. Then we have Faustin. Faustin is quite the hard worker. Faustin's a native of Talawanda. Of course, we got to Talawanda. The only 2 Christians in that village were the ones that we brought with us. Now there's a congregation there with over 30 Christians, and no matter which direction you leave, going out of Talawanda, the next village you come to, there's a congregation there now. It wasn't there before. Faustin came to us looking for work. He worked in brick wall, making mud bricks so we could build stuff. And he stayed and he learned the gospel. He became a Christian. He enrolled in school and he studied with us for 2 years. And now Faustin has stayed on there with us. He's our farm manager, and he's also one of the instructors there at the school. And that boy's always moving, always working. Everybody else is sitting in the shade. He's up doing stuff. He sees something needs done, he does it. And that's Faustin. Another worker that came to us in the early days was Lydia. Lydia was my side. And she came looking for work, and she began working as our cook. And she learned the gospel, became a Christian. When she became a Christian, her Maasai husband put her and her 5 daughters out. And so they've been living with us there at the school. And of Lydia's 5 daughters, the 3 that are of age are Christians. Her oldest daughter is 20. Faustin had his cap set for Helen. And being a Maasai, if you want to marry a Maasai girl, you've got to pay a dowry to her father of 6 cows. And so Faustin, in addition to all of his work at the school and his studies and those things, he looked out and scrimped and saved and leased some farmland and began planting crops of his own that he could take and sell at market. And he hustled, and he's bought Helen's father 5 cows by December of this past year. When we were there in December, he was 1 cow short. Me and Greg bought the last cow. And before New Year's, him and Helen, and they're there with us at this field. Then we have Gaston. Gaston's story is very similar to Faustin, another native of Talawanda. Came to us for work, learned the gospel, and became a student there. And after graduating, he became the preacher for the Lord's church there at Talawanda. And here we are worshiping with the Maasai congregation in a village about 30 minutes from Talawanda, congregation that Gaston planted. And Gaston, he may not be as good looking as the guy on Beauty and the Beast, but he's close. But so Gaston is preaching there at Talawanda. He's planted this congregation and a couple of others. And his parents lived there at Talawanda. They're not Christians. And his mother, when she learned that he was going to be preaching there at Talawanda, she told her husband, I don't care what you do, but I'm going to go listen to my son preach. And so she's been worshiping there at Talawanda and studying the Bible. And she's been inviting her Muslim and tribal religion practicing friends to come to study and to learn the gospel. She's not a Christian yet. She's getting close. Gaston has his cap set for Jennifer, Lydia's second daughter. And he's not as far along in the cow buying process as Faustin, but he's getting there. And then we have David. David was a Christian when he came to us. And while he was there at school, he learned that a couple of his childhood friends were in a village about an hour and a half away. So he went and visited with them, and over the course of several visits, taught them the gospel. They became Christians. No congregation. So after graduating, David has moved to that village there with his friends, and he's working with them to help to establish a congregation in that village. Then we have Alex. Alex is a bit of a different duck. He does things on his own time. He was sent to us by a Fire Gospel Pentecostal church. They wanted him to learn the Bible. His dad is the preacher for that church. And so Alex came and he studied with us. He learned the Bible. And when we were there for graduation in July, one of the things we needed to do was to sit down with each student individually and visit with them, see what they learned, and get some feedback from them, those things. And we were talking about Alex. Alex was still not a Christian. Me and Greg were talking, what are we going to do? We can't give this man a diploma saying he's learned the Bible if he doesn't understand what it takes to be a Christian. What are we going to do? So we sat Alex down. We said, Alex, if you were to die right now, would you go to heaven? He said, well, before I would have said yes. But now, after some of the things I've learned, I would say no. So my second question to him is, well? He said, I've been thinking about this. And first, I want to be faithful to the church that sent me. They sent me to learn the Bible. I want to graduate and show them that I accomplished that which they sent me to do. But second, I don't want to be confused. If I'm baptized now, they'll think that I was baptized just so I could graduate. I don't want them to think that. And if I'm baptized while you're here, they'll think I was baptized just so I could please them in Jews. I don't want them to think that. So here's what I want to do. I want to graduate, receive my diploma, show them that I accomplished what they sent me to do. And then I want to go home to that congregation. I want to tell them I went and I learned the Bible as you sent me to do, and I need to tell you what I've learned. I want to preach the gospel to them and tell them what it takes to be a Christian and the identity of the church. And then I'm going to tell them that I'm going down to the river to be baptized and you should come with me too. We were satisfied with Alex's answer, so we allowed him to graduate. The graduation representatives of that congregation came. He graduated on Saturday, and he met with the members of that congregation and said, listen, tomorrow is Sunday. I need to come and I need to preach. I need to tell you some of the things I've learned. It's very important. They said, no. They said, it's too soon. This is very important. Could you give us a week? We want to make time to. We don't want to have time to prepare so that we can have a meal and invite the whole village so everybody can come and they can learn. We'll do it next week. So Alex said, okay. So after a week, Alex went and he preached the gospel. Upon hearing what Alex taught, his father flew into a rage. Put Alex's mother in the hospital. In the aftermath of that, Alex found himself accused and was in prison. Eventually, the air cleared and Alex was exonerated. The first thing he did when he got out of prison was he was baptized in Christ. So he's gone back to his home village in Kenya and begun working. He's talked to the village elders and they gave him land to build a church building, which thanks to the generosity of some saints in South Texas, that building's been built. And he is supporting himself. He's working as a boda driver, like a motorcycle taxi, to support himself and evangelizing. And when we were there in December, he said, that's fine, but when I'm on my motorcycle, I'm not doing the Lord's work. I need to be doing the Lord's work. So I want to buy some goats and use the goats to support myself so that I can spend more time on the Lord. And so he's done it. He's bought goats and he's been supporting himself and evangelizing the members of that village. Alex is a great teacher of the Bible. When they have a Bible, when members of his dad's congregation have a Bible question, they go to Alex. And Alex's dad is starting to listen. It's a slow process. But there's a growing church there in his village. As I mentioned, we had a problem there at Talawanda. We received 15 new students at a school that can house 10. 6 of them were married. Of course, their wives were required to come and take classes too. So Emmanuel got busy. Emmanuel was not a Christian. He came to us looking for work. He's now a brother in Christ. And he started making bricks. With those bricks, he built 4 duplexes like this. Each of those can house 2 families. And now we have enough room for our 15 students. What a great problem. Of those 15 students, 13 of them were not Christians when they came to us. One of them was Muslim. Now all but one are Christians. And that last one I think is very close. The Muslim, his name was Ali. And he was baptized and he said, I don't want to be called Ali anymore. That name comes from my old way. I want to be called Wadi. Because I'm a Christian. I want to be a gospel preacher. And again, I mentioned the pigs. The pigs there at Talawanda have been doing very well. The big problem we've had is we've had to expand the pig barn twice. But we've let the pigs pay for that expense. And so we're teaching these men to work with their own hands. And by the way, this picture here, there in the background, you see one of our students digging up cassava that they had planted. We had that cassava for dinner that night. And in the foreground, that's Brother Lazaro. Lazaro's Maasai. Maasai are master herdsmen. If they see a cow or a goat, it belongs to Maasai because Maasai are master herdsmen. Every goat belongs to Maasai. And so we couldn't keep goats there at the school because they disappeared. Lazaro learned the gospel. He's now a brother in Christ. He's our night guard there at the school. Now we can have goats because we have Maasai to keep our goats. And Lazaro is also now becoming a student there at the school. So he's working as our night guard and studying as a student, learning the candle called Hopkins. One of the places that we were blessed to visit when we were in Turkey is Haran. This is the ancient Haran from which Abraham and Sarah left to go to Canaan. This is where Rebekah left to become Isaac's wife. This is where Jacob went to marry Rachel. And when we went there, these houses are not the same ones that Abraham and Sarah saw. These are much newer. These are modern homes, only like 800 years old. But this is probably the style. And when we were there, you kind of get a sense. You're there in this walled city, right on a major trade route, and there's all the prosperity and all the amenities and the conveniences that come with that. I think about the conversations that Abraham and Sarah must have had. As Abraham said, Sarah, we have to leave tomorrow. Well, where are we going? I don't know. Well, what's it going to be like? I don't know. What are we going to do when we get there? I don't know. But the Lord said for us to go, so we're going to go. Much more now than before, there's a lot of unknowns in our life. How high is the gas price going to go? I don't know. Is COVID going to go away? What about monkeypox? I don't know. But we're called to go. So we go where we can and do what we can. Opportunities present themselves. Opportunities like our release. When we were there in July for graduation, we had to go back to the main city a day early for our COVID test so we could get home. It was kind of funny about getting home. And so we went there, we took our COVID test, and then went out to dinner. And after dinner, we needed to ride back to the hotel. So I did what anybody would do. I pulled out my phone and I held an Uber. And there's Eloise, waiting outside our restaurant looking for one more Uber fare. And we got into his car and he said, what brings you to Tanzania? For some reason, he thought we weren't from around here. And we said, well, we're here teaching the Bible. He said, really? I love the Bible. You know, I read it all the time. I wanted to be a pastor, but seminary is so expensive. I said, you don't say. You know, I've got some friends here in Dar. They would teach you the Bible for free. It's free? Really? Absolutely. Well, let me get your phone number. So I got his phone number and began texting with the brothers at Tanzania Bible School. And I always said, can I take you to the airport tomorrow? I said, absolutely. Here's what time you can be here. So he showed up and took us to the airport. And on the way, everything's great. We hit a traffic jam. He said, don't worry, I know shortcut. Turned off down this side street, and we're driving right past the church building in Tanzania Bible School. I said, stop the car. I'm getting out. So we went in, we introduced the preacher there, introduced the elders, and they got his information, made plans for him to worship with him the next Lord's Day, and put evangelist materials in his language and his language. And I've stayed in contact with Eloise. Actually, he was our driver when we were there in December. We started school at Tanzania Bible School in January. He's been writing to me. I'm so excited. I'm learning the Bible. I'm a new preacher. Now, he's not yet a Christian, but he's learning. He's excited to me, all because he can't be there a day early and he's going back. Yeah. Things I have upcoming. I have some funds to raise to be able to continue to do the things that we need to do while we're here in the States. I do focus on local evangelism. I have some Bible studies that we're working on. Interestingly enough, there was one Bible study that I just concluded recently while I was in Uganda. Got a random Facebook message. Somebody says that, I hear you're a pastor. I have Bible questions. Well, we could deal with that. As this is somebody in the United States I started studying with while I was in Africa. She was baptized in Christ about 2 weeks ago. Members of another congregation. She's actually from the Northeast. I've never even met her. But also have more trips planned to Tanzania and Uganda, not going to Cameroon to the fighting stops. Also looking at other opportunities as they open up. We're looking at maybe some opportunities in Colombia, Morocco. We'll see where things fall in place. Also producing training materials in English, Swahili, Persian, Turkish. If you haven't done so, check out our website, mannafarm.org. While you're there, subscribe to our email list. I'll send out no more than once a week. Keep it short. I think you'll find it encouraging. If you're on social media, like and follow us on Facebook. Notice that's Manna Project Church of Christ. There's another group out there called Manna Project, which is bigger than us. They're sectarian. They're not us. Manna Project Church of Christ. It's really cool. You'll get to see the things that are going on over there. They're about 9 hours. We do need 5 congregations or individuals to have fellowship with us this year, and that'll fully fund all the things that we have. I want to leave you with this verse from Colossians chapter 1. And in verse 4, Paul talks about their faith, hope, and love. It's interesting to put those things together. But then in verse 5, he talks about the hope which is laid up for you in heaven. Not here, in heaven. The more I see things here, the more I'm glad our hope's not here. But that hope which is laid up for you in heaven, which you heard before in the word of the truth of the gospel. One word, one truth, one gospel. But it's the gospel that tells us about that hope. The people around us need hope. The gospel gives it to you. He says, which is come unto you as it is in all the world and brings forth fruit, as it does also in you. My next door neighbor and I keep beans together. And last year he decided he's going to plant some sweet clover for our bees to forage on. Clover's doing very well. But he's talking to an old farmer and asking questions. Well, what do I need to do about the clover? You know, what soil amendments do I need to make? And how deep do I need to plant? What about watering? What about this? And what about that? And finally, the farmer said, look, son, it's seed. Put it in the ground. Get it wet. And grow it. That's what it does. I think sometimes we can be that way with us. We spend a lot of time worrying and fussing and fidgeting with what about this, and oh, this isn't the right time, or they're not ready, or they won't be receptive, and we need this thing, and it's seed. The same God that made the clover seed made the seed of the word of God. Notice what it says. It brings forth fruit. That's what it does. Put it in the ground. Get it wet. Brings forth fruit since the day that you heard of it, and you, the grace of God, in truth. There's a lot of people out there that don't know the grace of God. There's a lot of people out there who think they know the grace of God, but they don't know the truth of it. And when they hear the truth of it, it will change the world. And we have the blessed privilege of sharing this evening. It could be that you realize there's something in life that's out of step with the gospel. Maybe you realize that you're outside the body and you want the truth of the grace of God. Maybe you just need prayers. It doesn't have to be forgiveness. It could be wisdom, strength, courage. Something that's on your mind, somebody that you're worried about. That's what the family's for. Let's pray together about those things. This evening, if you have any, if you're subject to words of invitation, won't you please let me while we stand and sing?